Welcome to the Supply Chain Beyond the Hype podcast with me, Chris Clowes, and a variety of guests from across the supply chain world, ready to share their insights, stories, and experience to help you go beyond the hype. Hello everyone, and welcome to this month's podcast, Supply Chain Beyond the Hype, the podcast where we explore the innovations and ideas that are reshaping supply chains around the world. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy what we're talking about and share it with your friends and colleagues. I'm Chris Clowes, and today we're delving into the transformative potential of virtual load collaboration in logistics and its potential impact in our communities, cities, and for the public sector. Joining me, I have two very special guests from Clowes, a pioneering company in the supply chain as a service space. It's my pleasure to introduce Michael Ostromov, founder and CEO of Clowes, and John Ingram, Associate Director and all-round transport expert. Clowes is revolutionising the way that goods are transported by enabling smarter, more efficient load collaboration. Something that the industry has been trying to do for decades. Is this finally the solution to help the public and private sector? This isn't just about improving supply chains and saving money, improving service. It's about creating tangible benefits for local authorities, reducing traffic congestion, and cutting emissions in our cities. In this episode, we'll explore the challenges in the public sector, uncover how Clowes works, and look at the impact on urban planning and sustainability as we discuss what the future holds for logistics collaboration. Just before we delve in, it'd be great to hear from you and John and Michael a little bit about yourselves. John, maybe you can kick us off.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Chris. So I've got about 35 years industry experience now for my sins. So I've had FMCG, 3PL experience. I've done a stint in the Department for Transport as an industry expert secondee, where I was helping them think about some of the policy challenges that they had. And I've also got quite a good technological background regarding, I've worked for the KTN, I've worked for the Transport Systems Catapult, and I also do a lot of work for Innovate UK. And finally, as well, I've also been part of the Alliance for Logistics Cooperation in Europe technology platform, where I've helped inform the EU on where it should be spending some of its money on within the transport sector.
I feel like, John, is there anything you haven't done? That's a pretty varied career across a number of sectors. How would you kind of describe the differences between public and private sector?
It's very different. I think that one of the biggest learning curves for me was when I went in the Department for Transport after working for while I was with Wincanton, and obviously I went from an operational environment where I had to think on my feet, implement it tomorrow or next week at the latest, because it was all about making sure that the small margins that we were working with were being maximised, to going in the Department for Transport, where I had to get reined back in because I wanted to do it a lot quicker than I was allowed to do, because I had to speak to so many different stakeholders about their opinions on what needed to be done. So listen, Chris, there's a vast difference, but it's taught me some good life skills by having the exposure to that.
I can see Michael shaking. Let's move on quickly away from politics.
I just sympathize with the feeling. Yes.
Michael, maybe you could introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Well, I've been in the business in the sector for about over 20 years. I started as a management consultant working with kind of big consumer goods companies like Diageo, P&G, Kellogg's, Cadbury's, helping them out on various kind of supply chain related projects, all the way from kind of manufacturing logistics network, optimization, rationalization, down to procurement. And worked as well kind of on the other side with the various 3PLs on various projects, again involved in kind of either merger and acquisitions, but it's all about costs and performance improvement and restructuring and rationalizations. That's what kind of led me to about 10 years ago set up a value chain lab, the company that is specifically focused on building a software for that will enable users to actually take advantages of the modern or highly evolving kind of algorithms and capabilities to help them make better decisions and more in real time. So we've started with the business intelligence systems that worked very well on kind of not on premises, but within the perimeter of an individual business. But then now, so we're building Flocks, and we've launched Flocks. There's a platform, there's a network, it's a marketplace, and it's a network that connects many buyers with many sellers of logistic services, allowing them to kind of transact, find each other, optimize their relationships, and manage performance.
Awesome. I appreciate that introduction, Michael. And I guess a similar question to John. You've almost a career split in half between consulting and climbing the corporate ladder, and then entrepreneur and building something for yourself. What are the differences there?
Well, I think the biggest difference between consulting and actually doing something yourself is, like, previously you've always advised somebody what the good thing looks like, and then somebody else actually had to go and do it. And that kind of made me, on one hand, to see, well, actually, I'd like to do something myself with my own hands. And the second thing is, once you've kind of peeled the onion to how the real life actually works beyond just the data and the high level interviews, it became much more interesting and much more complex. So I very much enjoy doing things with my own hands and talking to people that are actually changing the world as we speak.
Yeah,
Rather
awesome.
than standing on the sidelines. So that's the idea.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for the introductions both, and thank you for joining me today. So Flux obviously works in the private sector and is ultimately trying to take vehicles off the road. Roads are managed by the public sector, and much of today's topic will focus on what the impact of load collaboration and better utilisation of vehicles would be on public policy, hence our great two guests today. So before we delve into the opportunities with Flocks and driving collaboration, John, from your experience working across government, the DfT, as well as in industry, from your experience, what are the challenges that local authorities and people deciding how we use our roads and where investment goes, what are the challenges that they're facing?
There's various themes, isn't there? And some of them are probably more obvious than others. You've got traffic congestion as a starting position. I think, wherever you live now, the roads are increasingly more, they're busier than they've ever been before. And that, we've got a contributor to that we need to own up to as a freight and logistics sector. And that's sort of redundant trips and inefficient logistics. So we've got urban areas that are facing severe delays for businesses and residents alike. We've got the more frustrating aim of sort of peak hour demand when we're all trying to get to work or get the kids to school, whatever we're trying to do. We're all fighting over the limited space available on our local roads, and it's having a major impact on how long it takes everyone to get where they want to get to. And finally, I guess I need to throw in there is curb management, which if you've been in a high street at certain times of the day, you'll see how many vehicles are there doing very similar things. Dropping off a couple of pallets or a couple of a few roll cages, and it has quite a significant impact on the local environment.
I think you should stand for councillor, John. You've just solved every single problem on our road network there and then. I mean, if we maybe start
talk about them resolve, Chris.
Yeah. I mean, let's start maybe with kind of capacity and our reluctance for investment in the UK in infrastructure. I think the debate around Heathrow's third runway is often running yet again. HS2, I think one of the biggest disasters in marketing is that it's not about getting from London to Manchester 20 minutes quicker. It's about freeing up capacity on the West Coast main line for freight and for commuter trains. And then you look at the state of our roads. So Labour have just, or the government have just announced £1.6 billion to go into road repairs and hopefully repairing potholes. It's understood that the figure required is 16.3 billion in order to tackle our road challenges. So how do you think that governments and local authorities who are cash strapped can balance investments across a multitude of areas? And what do you think needs to happen for them to prioritize investments into our road network?
I guess there's several strands to this from my perspective, because I've seen one of the main contributors to is we need everybody to commit really to behavioural change. We need to start collaborating, and we need to start doing something differently than what we've done previously. Okay. To do that, you obviously need access to the right data. You need visibility of what you're doing, and help, some mechanisms to help inform the policymakers and the people that are making the decisions, giving them some real evidence which enables them to, it might, you might be able to reduce that amount of sort of infrastructure costs if you can set yourselves up a little bit differently and go about what you need to achieve differently than what you're doing now. So, I think one win isn't gonna sort the world out regarding what needs to be done, but that I think there's several, there's those different tasks and those different activities that could be approached differently than what they have been done historically.
Yeah, I think when you're trying to look at almost societal-wide change, there's no silver bullet, and arguably driving behavioural change is the greatest challenge that any one of us faces. And
that's what I wanted to add is as well. A lot of we've seen that happening very often in different studies, and the behavior of the industry is very much of let's work harder, kind of very often forgetting how to work smarter, and very many big companies, I don't know, take the high street retailers, I don't know, Tesco's and Sainsbury's and so forth. They've optimized the hell out of their own supply chain, but they work within confines of their own business. This is only so much they can do. The next step would be how can you make them collaborate with one another? So you're not going to have a Tesco truck and a Sainsbury Arctic parked next to one another, and so no bus can overtake them, and the urban areas that get gridlocked completely. But that is a big challenge. I've seen multiple studies. We are also members of Center for Sustainable Road Freight, so there's quite a lot of academic research and industry research is done in this space. And one of the TfL studies has actually talked about collaboration, what they call involuntary collaboration, but the collaboration nonetheless is actually something that's the one of the only thing that can materially change the way that the sector works without the need for massive investments into consolidation depots and so forth. Requires a lot of real estate, land, and obviously money used for that. But the virtual consolidation, that's the approach that we are trying to take, has been proven time and again that it can materially impact the congestion, the environmental footprint, and the cost base. However, it requires change of way people think, way people work, way people kind of work with one another. I like that saying. So many clients, they don't compete inside a truck; they compete on the shelf. So very often they just need to be a bit more open-minded to different ways of working.
Yeah, and I think there's evidence when collaboration, when it's forced, can happen. I think the London Olympics were generally considered a huge success, and both construction was centralised in terms of delivery points and then ongoing support of the locations. Airports work that way. For security reasons, product is centralised, delivered in, and then spread out across the terminals. So it can work. And I think there's a case study in France between 4 major manufacturers where they managed to get something going. But unfortunately, they're few and far between. And I think that it's incumbent on as you said, John, earlier, it's how do we actually drive behavioural change and make people work differently? And I think, is the UK or are our challenges, are we too parochial when looking at this? So there was a recent article in Motor Transport from Reading County Council that they were blaming Oxford County Council for creating rat runs where trucks were then running through Reading city centre. Now, Reading and Oxford County Councils are responsible for their B and some of their A roads. Highways England is responsible for motorways and major trunk roads. Can we drive collaboration when we don't have a single road transport policy across the entirety of a relatively small island?
Well, yes.
I feel like putting the weight of the world on your shoulders, John.
Yeah, well, listen.
You're beginning to sweat.
I know you make me nervous. Listen, there is a real, there are some solutions, and Flocks is a solution, and a system like Flocks does enable local authorities, okay, to make, to make a difference by facilitating, coordinating, working with the sector to help drive the volume through this type of platform, which will enable businesses to be more efficient. Okay, it'll help them to be moving around more rather than sat in traffic. Okay, which has got to be a positive for the truck company or the operator. It's going to help the local authority reduce its emissions. It's going to help with both sides of the fence regarding resource inefficiencies, increasing costs, carbon reduction targets. You name it. You could put a plus for both sides of the fence here, for industry and for the local authority, to say if we could collaborate better and more effectively than what we've done before, we're both going to get a lot of benefit out of it. And for me as well, it's like, you've got a lot of combined authorities cropping up now. Okay, so you've got, close to where I live, you've got the West Midlands. Okay, so you've got Coventry, Birmingham, Dudley, Wolverhampton, etc., Sandwell. You've got all those local authorities now, which are under a combined authority. Okay, so let me take an example. I think what is seen is seen very positively by the public is the idea of freight consolidation centres. Okay, if I use that as an example. Okay, so freight consolidation centres. Okay, they could be costly if you had to take them on yourself, if you had to, all the capex expenditure and everything else. Okay, but a system like Flocks means that you potentially don't have to have all that capex cost. It could be a consolidation. It could be a distribution center that's already there, that's underutilized. Okay, and it would give a combined authority, for example, the opportunity to collaborate and work together and strategically put the consolidation centers in the right place, in the right parts of the city, okay, so that they could all work together to reduce congestion, help the industry profitability. It's you can see my passion for this, but it's not difficult, but we need people to stop really worrying about their commercial disadvantage that they might have for collaborating. You don't have to give away the stuff that you don't want to give away or make it available for others to use. But everyone's got loss-making routes. They've got things that they have to do that they probably don't want to do. They know what's going on in their own in their vertical supply chain, but they don't know what's available in the horizontal supply chain. So, a system like Flocks can open all that up for people. So, it's hopefully I've answered your question without going into too much detail. But
I was hoping to trend eventually on supply chain podcasts. I'm not sure if that is a list on Spotify, but I think I might be competing with Radio 4 here. Well, that's brilliant, John, and thank you. And it'll be a good
Well,
opportunity, I think, to
I, I,
introduce Michael.
I wanted to add, Chris, is as one of the points is actually to what John was saying is that there's not many let's say council or authorities recognize that there's not only the stick approach, there's not only restriction that they can play with, or limitations, or penalties, or demands, and so forth. There is actually quite the other side of economic benefits, so the commercial impact, and there's a perception of potential loss of either competitive advantage or revenue or margin for someone is actually not the case. It's more of a fear than the reality, and the collaboration, the virtual collaboration, as we were talking before, is actually potentially is the way that can kind of smooth and incentivize that process much more effectively without the need to pay off for the massive returns on investments on huge freight consolidation centers that will just drain quite a lot of resources, require payback that could undermine the whole setup. I think the industry, and again, there's lots of studies, and I think we've all seen ourselves. You look on the back of a truck that unloads something to a corner shop on the high street, it's 90% empty. It's 80% empty. There's so much air being kind of hauled about, and there's definitely a way to make a greater use of capacity that's already out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'd be great to hear a little bit about how flocks are solving these challenges and how the technology works. But just before we jump into that, John mentioned a point about electric trucks, and there's obviously an awful lot of focus at the moment on autonomous vehicles and electric trucks. And my question is often, are we trying to solve the right problem with electric vehicles and electric trucks? Because an electric truck or an autonomous truck in a traffic jam is still in a traffic jam. So we just don't have the capacity there's not enough road capacity to move the amount of vehicles that we're looking to move at the moment. So at the moment, the technology is focused on reducing emissions by making the vehicle itself more environmentally friendly. Surely we need to be focused on taking vehicles off the road.
And that's the idea. That was the thinking beyond sort of behind what led us to set up Flocks. Is, well, me personally, for example, I hate waste in its kind of waste of time, waste of resources, waste of money, waste of capacity, and so on and so forth. And if I see half an empty truck occupying a high street around which I can't move because there is a bus also blocking the way and so forth, and the whole thing is gridlocked for a mile, then that's obviously like, why is this happening? And what can be done about it? And with evolution of modern technology, and that's what's kind of underpinning the Flocks platform. So Flocks fundamentally is a marketplace, is a two-sided marketplace. So we have, on one hand, we have buyers of logistic services, people that need to move stuff from somewhere A to B. And on the other hand, you have logistic service providers that advertise their capacity and provide availability of their, whether it's a warehousing space or the transport space. And then the Flocks algorithms actually matches the two, the demand, the loads with the supply in the most effective way. So to your point, Chris, earlier, that how can we remove the unproductive trucks from the road? If 1,000 loads can be moved by 900 trucks in the traditional way, but with the networking algorithm that looks at everything and can cut it down to 750, we still have all of the deliveries, we still have all the stuff reaching the customers within the required constraints. Yet we have 120 less trucks, fewer trucks. It's savings cost, it's helping the environment, it's helping the congestion. But that's what I meant when I said working smarter rather than working harder. The challenge there was, and it still is the beauty of the mathematical algorithms that allow processing these huge amounts of data, which no planner been able to process within the confines of what they're looking at. They're looking at their own network. I mean, even the groupage service for 3PL, they can only look at the loads that were given to them. So the other 3PL's groupage is looking at a completely different set of loads. With Flocks, we are a software business. We are not a logistics service provider. So we're not competing with any one of them. We're enabling the best possible matches and a transaction facilitation. And that's the way that we are aiming to actually break that barrier. From the physical planning point of view, which will allow to increase the utilization that we're talking about.
Yeah, and John, you might have had this experience as well. It's been a while since I was in a traffic office doing the planning, but I remember I'd get all my orders in by 6 p.m., upload them into Paragon, tidy it up a bit, the geo fences that had gone or geocoding that had gone wrong, click a button, and then I'd go and make a coffee, and that was for 400 deliveries, 7 depots, 30 vehicles. If you extrapolate that out into, let's just say, just 100 supply chains, how has technology and maths and algorithms moved on from 15 years ago when I was doing this to enable flocks to look across multiple supply chains?
Well,
Keep this relatively straightforward so that I can understand it.
well, no, no,
I'm glad you've asked Michael that question, not me. Thank you.
Well, I'll try to say something simple. So what's I mean, with the traditional approach, the way that the Paragon and many others are kind of on premises or sort of the software packages that are using, it's the problem, the complexity of the problem grows exponentially. So if you said that if you have I don't know 7 depots and 30 vehicles to plan and 400 orders, if you double that, you actually it's in the power of X, the complexity and the number of permutation that works. So your time from a coffee break will stretch into an hour. It stretch into a couple of hours, and I mean we've seen in academic worlds it goes into like you need to overnight, and God forbid you made a mistake, then
It's
you
the
no
power of
longer have the time to
compounding.
replan it. Exactly, it's compounding. Yes, so the complexity grows exponentially. So the only way that you can approach that, and that's the beauty of modern kind of the setup and modern algorithms, you actually have a library of different things, and with the benefits of AI, you can actually optimize. The system can recognize which algorithm or which approach is going to work better. I'm not going to throw the terminology of that methodology versus that methodology, but there's quite a lot of I don't know. One of them is called a genetic optimization. The other one is simulated annealing. So there's lots of things that you can play with. But the point is the system churns out. It's first of all with the very advanced algorithms, and there's been quite a lot of progress in that space. And the second thing is, so with the help of AI and the cloud-based setup, you actually have a peak processing capacity that can be scaled up and scaled down depending on your need. If it's just a noon and you have only I don't know 1,000 orders and 700 trucks to plan, it's much simpler. You can churn it in a couple of minutes. But then some of them gets booked, so they get off the from the pool that needs to be planned, and then some new orders come in. But we still could be talking within minutes. So you no longer need to have hours, whilst you have essentially the improvement is being happening in front of your eyes. So you can make the booking whenever you want, but you know that the system looks at the whole of the network holistically. So it optimizes for everybody at the same time, not at the expense of individual bits.
Yeah, and the title of this entire newsletter and podcast is Supply Chain Beyond the Hype. There is so much money that has gone into logistics tech over the last couple of years, the post-COVID boom. We're all still running logistics and supply chains on spreadsheets, apparently, and there's people that are going to bring that silver bullet that we've talked about before, John, and does it really exist? So have recent advancements in machine learning AI actually helped flocks bring a product to market that can be used in the real world?
It helps it helps a lot, and it helps in two ways. Is one, it actually helps. So there's a lot of what we've seen, and I'm sure that many of our colleagues out there have noticed that many companies, they work on like a lot of different silos, the operational silos or the data silos. There's lots of erroneous data that is very hard to reconcile just by simple I don't know matching like you do in an Excel spreadsheet. There's always something they need to manually adjust and find something that's been hidden or dropped off. So the AI actually helps to make sense from the data that is not 100% clean or perfectly matched. That's one thing. But then the second thing is it actually helps recognizing patterns much better and much more effectively. So the suggested improvement algorithms that then are selected to address a particular problem could be done much more quickly and much more effectively. And this is the advancements of AI and the modern neural networks and lots of other terms that are used kind of in that space. That helps a lot. So with the traditional kind of definitive algorithm that looks at very specific parameters and does a very, very specific thing, the days of this type of software and approaches are gone, and gone for good.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you keeping that explanation at a level that I can understand, which is very low. And John, it's great to hear that kind of view of this as a technology, but how, from the conversations you're having with public authorities and various bodies, how do you see this working in the real world? What benefits can it bring? How does it help local authority to deliver on their goals?
So it's, I'm just going to cover your technology point that you mentioned. So, it's fantastic. The freight logistics sector, the technology side of things as well. People are doing some great work. Okay. So, but from a vehicle perspective, you can replace a diesel, you can replace a diesel truck with an electric vehicle. Okay. That's brilliant. It's going to contribute to obviously reducing emissions. Okay. It's not going to do anything about the congestion, is it? Or the, or how long it takes people to get around. You're still going to have that problem. So, I see this as a real, this type of technology as a real opportunity to help inform and help local authorities incentivize the sector in the right way. So let me give you an example. Okay, so let's take the Reading potential to charge everyone for driving a truck in their city. Okay, it's a bit of a stick approach, but they're obviously frustrated, and they need to do something about it. Okay, there's different ways you could, if you've got a system like Flocks, for example. Okay, you could have some designated distribution centres. Use the Flocks system, for example, and if you trunk all your deliveries into the local distribution centre, freight consolidation centre, guess what? Then we won't charge you for sending your lorry into the city centre. Okay, we'll come to some other arrangement where you don't have to worry about that. We're prepared to work together and offer something where we don't want trucks. We don't want trucks in our city centre. Okay, so let's look at how we can work differently, where the industry will get something from it, and we will get something from it, because it'll help us reduce congestion. It'll help us reduce emissions. It will allow the public and the businesses that operate in the city to move around and get around a lot more efficiently and quicker than what they would do now. So that's an example of the stick approach. Can only ever work to a point. Sometimes you've got to think beyond that, and think, okay, a change of tact, a change of how we work together. But I guess one of the main contributors to that is having the visibility of the data and visibility of the movements and visibility of what's the prize. Until you size the prize, it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, and so many incentives at the moment are stick approach. You take the ULEZ, you take congestion charge zoning, LTNs, or even restricted delivery times. It's almost arguably a little bit easier with the public, because there tends to be in major cities good public transport infrastructure. If you start banning trucks, how do you make a delivery to a shop? So where I live here in Austria, on the side of the truck, there is the phrase, lorries bring every day that which you use every day. And it's so very true. Everybody hates lorries generally, but we all need them every single day of our lives. So it would be great if we could see that transition to carrot rather than stick. And how would you see that working then in Flocks from your perspective, Michael, when we look at that example in Reading?
Well, that's the situation. So what Flux does, or what the algorithms do, is that they optimize they do the route, they create the route plan with them in the most effective and optimized way. So it's the shortest, it's a multi-stop, it's the one that complies with various constraints and requirements. So, for example, the cost of a journey will take into account a congestion charge that could be applied for a particular, or I don't know, Dartford crossing, for example, or it could be a levy particular through a center of Reading. It could be connected to well, it's a curb management bit that John, you mentioned. It's there's a limitation, for example, of loading unloading windows. So, for example, yes, we do want to have our trucks delivering, I don't know, fresh bread in the morning, but we don't want to see the trucks themselves. So, can they deliver at 4 in the morning instead of 8? Where there's a peak traffic. So it's the management of the journey and initial planning that can be optimized in time, not just simply based on the distance and the load and so forth. So complying with those requirements would actually alleviate the stress. I don't want to use the word congestion in that case, but the stress on the system, the virtual consolidation. So can you consolidate the loads that are outside of town, have a multi-stop picking up the loads, and then you have a very, very focused delivery. You drop the whole load and you go out, rather than you've optimized like the big retailers have. You have a massive truck that is loaded with, I don't know, 50 cages, and then it goes on the 10-stop journey. And by the stop number 3, they're already half empty, but they're still going about. So that's that's a different way of looking at the optimization across the network, rather than within the 4 walls of a single business.
And I think that's the key change, isn't it? Across the network rather than an individual supply chain. Well, it's been really good to hear from both of you and hear the views and what can be done to improve the capacity on our roads by taking stuff off of them rather than necessarily building new roads. As we think about our final thoughts, Michael, software or supply chain software as a service is a relatively new concept. Even at the very start of my career, I was putting WMSs onto servers in warehouses. So we've seen software as a service start to develop and being hosted in the cloud. Blockchain came and went, and is it going to come back with AI and machine learning? AI is I think truly making a difference potentially. So, and also software as a service and other things as a service is becoming more and more. I no longer buy my Microsoft package, get a CD-ROM. My laptop doesn't even have a CD-ROM. It just renews every year for £70, and the only winner there was Microsoft. So where do you see technology in the supply chain space in 5-10 years time? Will AI and machine learning have transformed everything, or are we going to be doing what we're doing now?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. One is interesting. You mentioned kind of supply chain as a service, and we talked about collaboration. Collaboration is actually a couple decade old concept, probably even longer. But it came from academia, and it hit the wall of lack of trust, lack of ability to process data fast, and so forth. And it's just now with the modern tech, cloud, AI, fast computing capacities, and so forth, and cheap memories, that we actually now physically are able to deliver what is needed for such collaboration. And some of them, if you look beyond the hype of AI, there's a concept called AI agents. And it's an agent-driven kind of approach, and this is kind of where we see the whole thing is going, is automation of many routine tasks where computer algorithms just do work for us on our behalf with whatever authority in the most effective way, obviously being constrained by, let's say, simplicity of just routine repetitive tasks. And automation of autonomous driving, I think the direction of travel is autonomous supply chains.
Do you think that will happen? When I first implemented a software solution for demand planning, black box supply chains have been around since the 80s.
That's what I was saying. The concepts are around, but
humans can't help themselves. Humans want to touch, mess with it, think they know better, but invariably they don't. So is it going to change? And actually, John, bringing into what you said right at the start of the conversation, the biggest challenge in all of this is people. It's culture. In any change management project, the hardest thing is is the cultural change. If you're in a business, and there you've got 1,000 people that are aligned roughly to the same goal. If you're trying to deliver change in the public sector, you've got 65, 70 million people in the UK that have all got very competing goals, a different vision of what they think the UK should stand for. So how do we, and a question for both of you, and maybe Michael kick us off, how do we deliver that cultural change and for people?
Well, I think my approach to that would be, I remember the phrase that one of my clients said when we built the BI system for them, business intelligence system. She said, you've given me the gift of time. I said, what do you mean? He said, like, instead of spending 1.5 days of creating a report in Excel spreadsheet, I now can create it at the touch of a button, and then I spend a day and a half doing something about it, which is a much better use of people's time. And I think when people wake up to an idea, well, actually, stuff can happen for them, and they can apply their expertise much more effectively, much more productively to greater impact. All of that kind of churn and routine tasks could be taken care of by computers. And I think the younger generations that are growing up, they're already more familiar. It's like the social networks. They haven't been around 20 years ago, but they are now becoming a part of everything. I mean, podcasts. I mean, since when we were doing this, and since when people were looking at that. And I think in supply chain, when the younger workforce kind of come in, they are much more open to let computers take a bigger share of heavy lifting.
Yeah, my nephew is a little bit older than one, and he is just at the very end of Generation Alpha, and Generation Beta were born at the start of 2025. I'm glad I'm 20 years into my career, but I think every generation has always said that. And maybe John, the final word from you.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'm going to use. I'm going to use a scenario that our European friends how they've approached this, and I'm going to use some of my alliance.
Yeah, I guess you weren't a fan of hard Brexit then.
Alliance for Logistics Cooperation in Europe. Okay, so the Europeans seem to be just set up slightly differently than what we do. So they have clusters within their countries. Okay, and I think what they then have is they might have 400 or 500 businesses that are part of a cluster. Okay. So straight away, then they've got some sort of commonality around agreeing what they want to do and how they want to go about it, and then they get more of a consensus about, okay, yeah, let's collaborate, because we know you want to do this, we've got something that can complement it. Then all of a sudden, what you do is what I like to say: you start the wave. Okay, so you start the momentum, and then you start being able to offer, different things, because you've got a common voice and you've got a lot of commonality about what we're going to focus on. So, I think we just need to look at, how, talking to like for like businesses, see where there's synergies, see what we are happy and what we're not happy collaborating on. And just look to do something a bit differently, be a bit more, just be adventurous and just see what's possible by probably talking to people that you might not speak to normally, because you see them as a competitor, or, you see them as a threat, and just seeing what comes out of it. Because, unless you dip your toe in the water, you're not going to know, what the outcome's going to be.
I think there's a whole new podcast there, John, on different approaches to business across Europe, the UK, and let's, for the fun of it, throw in the US as well. Well, really appreciate both of your time. It's been really interesting to see the challenges from almost a private sector, a public sector, and a technology perspective. So thank you, John, and thank you, Michael. And for those, I hope those listening, I hope you've enjoyed it, and please do subscribe if you want to get hold of future podcasts. Thank you both. Thanks for listening to Supply Chain Beyond the Hype. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and get notified when new episodes are released.